Judge Griffin B. Bell at King and Spalding offices till June 12th, 1990. Bill Boast and Cliff Kuhn interviewing. In what I've read, Judge, I haven't read too much about your upbringing, about your background and education. I know very little other than that you were born in America. So maybe you could first let us know something about your family's background and your education.
I was born in America, and my forebears have been down there in that area since 1827 when they came from South Carolina.
Okay.
And across the river in Washington and Wilkes County, Georgia they call it. My father was a farmer and a merchant, and he had a oil distributorship and some other things of that sort. And I have a family of my father came from a large family, as did my mother. My family had only 3 children.
Okay.
I grew up and went to school at Georgia during the Depression, and I went to Georgia Southwestern College there, which was a 2-year college. In those days you'd get in law school with 2 years.
Right.
Then I went in the military. When I got out, I went to Mercer Law School, and so I only have 1 degree. I have one, which is a law degree.
What propelled you into law?
I had the lawyers in my family. My father's cousin was name was R.C. Bell. Reason Bell was his first name. Reason. He was Chief Justice of the Georgia Supreme Court.
Okay.
When I was growing up, he was held up as a role model, I guess you'd say. And my father got interested in me going to law school and talked about it a lot when I was a child. And I guess that's how I sort of got into it. Can't remember a time when I didn't want to be a lawyer. Even though times were hard and it was very difficult to get an education during the Depression.
You spent 5 years in the military or so, didn't you?
Yeah, almost 5.
And in the South Pacific, is that right?
I had one of the worst war records you could have. I never did anything as brave or anything like that. I stayed in the United States somewhere the whole time, and it was a great subject of a great problem. I had congressmen trying to get me overseas. I thought my life was ruined if I didn't get in combat in some way. And turned out it hadn't made any difference at all, one way or the other. But I got to know the United States well. I was all over the country, but I never got overseas.
Okay.
I even tried to get in the paratroopers thinking I could get overseas, but they wouldn't let me out of what I was doing. So that was it. I was in charge of a lot of part of the war, but transportation, all motor and rail transportation at the Fort Lewis, Washington staging area and the Fort Lawton, Washington staging area, where you bring in all the sending people to the Pacific and bringing them back.
Mm-hmm.
And they just right on there. I was doing an essential job. That's all I could do.
Did you go to law school before or after the
After.
war? What was Mercer Law School like back then?
It was very small. I was en route to Athens to go to the University of Georgia. I'd married and had a baby. Griffin Jr. was a baby. And I said to my wife, we were driving through Macon, I believe I'll go over here to the Mercer Law School and talk with the dean, see if he'll get me a job. Doubt I can get a job in Athens in a law firm. So I went over and talked to Dr. Dean Field, Meade Field, who later went to Georgia to teach, but he was a dean at Mercer then. And he said they had quarter system, he said if you make good grades the first quarter, I'll guarantee you a job in a law firm. And he got me a job in a firm which is now called Anderson, Walker and Rickett.
Mm-hmm.
In Macon.
Well-known firm down there, and I got a second quarter, I was working over in that law firm.
Is that the same Anderson family that ran the newspapers there?
No relation, but they are cousins of Sidney Linnea.
Okay.
The firm was called Anderson and Linnea, and Sidney Linnea's father was Linnea, and he was a scrivener of the firm.
Huh.
They were brothers-in-law.
Huh.
And the best-known member of the family now is Judge Linnea Anderson, who is on the 11th State Court of Appeals. He's the son of the Anderson and the grandson of the 2 people who were in the firm when I was working there while I was going to law school.
Okay.
So I worked there and I took the bar exam. In those days, you could take the bar examination anytime you wanted to. And I passed the bar examination after going 4 quarters. But I decided I'd keep on going till I got a degree because I was essentially practicing law anyway. That's what I did.
How did you end up at Lawton and Cunningham?
They offered me the best job. I had job offers in several cities. And that was the best job I had. And the reason they could make such a good offer, they were general counsel of a railroad. And they had the railroad pay me. That was a peculiar setup. The railroad paid, everybody in the law firm was paid something by the railroad. And one of the lawyers was the general counsel. And then we had a regular practice that represented 2 banks and a lot of other things. But that was the beginning of my railroad career, which next took me to Rome, Georgia.
I was wondering how you got to
It was
Rome.
the same thing. The chairman of the board of the railroad lived in Rome, Georgia. Al Ledbetter.
Is that W&A or which
No,
rail?
Central Georgia,
Central Georgia.
which is now part of the Southern.
Yeah.
Central Georgia was the old railroad, and mainly in Georgia, and ended at Chattanooga and went over in Alabama. And Mr. Ledbetter's lawyer committed suicide, and suddenly hadn't been sick or anything, on account of something that happened on a lawsuit. And he called me and told me he wanted me to come to Rome, leave Savannah and come up to Rome. And I never been to Rome in my life, but he worked it out where I became a partner with 2 other people that I didn't know. But of course I went up and met them.
Yeah.
And the firm became Matthews, Maddox, and Bell. And we had a very good practice, but I didn't stay there too long because I came to join this firm.
I noticed it was just a year or so after you went on to Rome.
About not quite 2 years. I went there on January 1, 1951. January 1, 52.
Mm-hmm.
And I came down here on August 1, 53.
Okay. And what brought you to King and Spalding?
They had a lawyer here, a young trial lawyer named James Branch, who died. He was 34
I've
years
heard of
old,
him.
had a heart attack. And they were scouting around over the state trying to find somebody the same age that had a lot of trial experience. And they found me, and I came down here and talked with them. They came up to see me a couple of times, and I turned them down because I didn't think they could take in enough money to pay the rent. I asked them what the rent was. It's pretty high compared to what it was in Rome. But they came back the second time, and I agreed to come down here.
And they brought you in as a partner, right?
I came in as a partner, yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, well, I wouldn't have done, there wouldn't be any way to come otherwise. I mean, I was already a partner making a very good living in Rome.
What was King and Spalding like in 1953?
We had 9 lawyers. 9, I think. I may have been the 10th.
Okay.
Very small, but they had a big, important practice. And as a matter of fact, I never would have agreed to come down here until I saw the books. They let me look at the books, and I looked at the books back to 1929. And they had been doing very well all that time, and a lot of that time they only had 4 partners. Even during the Depression years, they made substantial sums of money. And had the same clients pretty near the whole time. At Coca-Cola Company and Trust Company in Georgia, which was sort of the backbone of it. You know, it's not so any longer, it's so big now. But back in those times, and Robson Humphrey, we had them. We had about 5 or 6 main clients, and that was the backbone of the law firm. And the generation of the great lawyers that they had in the firm was getting ready to change because they were getting old. Mr. Spalding, Mr. Troutman, Mr. Brock had already gone to the Coca-Cola Company, and Mr. Sibley had left to go to the bank. And they were looking for another generation. I was the same age as the sons.
Is Bobby Troutman or
Bobby Troutman and Hugh Spalding Jr. and
Hugh Spalding Jr.?
James Sibley.
Mm-hmm.
See, Jim Branch was that contemporary. School with
right.
all of them. And so I just fit into that slot. And enjoyed it. Been here ever since, except when I left a couple of times to go do other things.
Right. Now, maybe you could
We
describe.
got a joke around here that I've been in King's Spalding 3 times. And Dick Denny introduced me with somebody one time and said that I gave him a job when he was at Emory Law School, but said since then I've given him a job twice.
Okay. Maybe you could describe what being an attorney either in Savannah or Rome or at King and Spalding in the late 40s and early 50s was like as opposed to today.
Well, it's quite different. Quite different. When I was in Savannah, we had 150 lawyers at Savannah Bar. Probably got 500 now. It is. And people were laid back. You go out to get coffee at 11 o'clock in the morning in a saloon, which is right near our office. The lawyers would all gather there to get coffee, and you settle most of your cases there while you're talking. And you tried many more cases than you try now. There's nothing to go try a case, but didn't have discovery. So if you wanted to litigate something, you had to litigate it. And cases were short. I mean, you could try a murder case, most complicated sort of case in 2 or 3 days. And you'd go in these small towns around. They'd have court twice a year. You'd go to a lot of those to try cases. Federal court had one judge for the whole part of
Judge
Southern
Sibley.
District of Georgia.
Judge Sibley.
No, that was Judge Scarlett.
Okay.
And he'd come to Savannah twice a year. All the lawyers would go over to his chambers and visit with him on the first morning, have coffee and be relaxed. Then he'd sign the docket. Go out to the courtroom and sign the docket. And you could get an idea of when your case was going to be tried that way. And he'd try everything until he finished. Then you wouldn't see any more of him for 6 months. And this was a very good system because you could have some time to your own. I mean, you could relax sometimes, take a vacation, or work on a case somewhere else. And the state courts had terms of court, but in a town as large as Savannah, it really didn't help you in it because they had city court, had recorder's court, had municipal court, and superior court. But they only had one superior court judge. And I tried a lot of cases then. I remember I was told Judge Atkinson was on the bench then, down there, and David Atkinson, and his son was killed in World War II, and he liked lawyers, particularly young veterans like me, and helped us all. And I told his daughter this not long ago. I was in Savannah at a funeral. He told me one day that if I kept doing as well trying cases as I'd been doing it, I'd probably end up at that Spalding Coca-Cola firm in Atlanta someday.
He was prophetic.
Yeah, I told his daughter about that.
I read an article you wrote in the State Bar Journal a few years back where you talked about hourly billing and how we now strive for those hours every month, and
Yeah.
contrasted that to your early practice.
Yeah, we didn't have any hourly billing. Most clients of any sophistication would make you tell them in advance what you were going to charge. And sometimes you couldn't get the right amount out of your mouth, and you'd charge half of what you ought to charge. I've seen Mr. Spalding do that, by the way. He was a master at charging supposed to be, and I've seen him lose out one time in a contest with Mr. Eugene Stetson, who ran the Guarantee Trust in New York. He was Georgia originally. Mr. Spalding quoted him a price half of what it should have been. It was a large sum. And we left the meeting. I said, Mr. Spalding, we lost money on that deal. We never come out on that, and we didn't. But that was the way it was, and you got paid only for the value of what you did, particularly if you didn't get paid in advance. And now value has very little to do with it. It's just you just run your hours up, and sometimes you have to reduce the hours because too many hours devoted to something more than something's worth. But it presents quite a management problem now, and not overloading cases, and not having lawyers devote more time to a matter than it's really worth. Sometimes it'd be better to just tell a client to go just pay, because we're going to charge you more than it's worth. But the way we used to handle that in the old days, business would seek its level. If our overhead was too high to quote a reasonable fee for a particular matter, we'd send them to another law firm that had a low overhead. we had about 4 or 5 levels of law firms in Atlanta. We were constantly sending business out. That's a change. You don't send that much business out now. Don't send out as much as you should, probably. But at any rate, the hourly, I was here in this firm when we put the hourly rate system in. We only put it in to check one client. We had a client that was paying a retainer, and it was a bank, trust company in Georgia. And we thought we were losing money on it, so we heard of this hourly system. Jimmy Sibling and I got us up a form, which is still being used around here, and went down to see Charlie Thwaite, who was running the bank, and he agreed to try it out for 3 months. And we proved what we were trying to prove, and that is the bank was paying us just half of what it should have been paying us. And but we never did stop using the form, and I left a year or two after that to go on the bench, and we only had a few lawyers. You had to volunteer to use the form, and Mr. Spalding and Mr. Troutman said they'd resign from the practice before they'd ever be caught filling out a form. But by the time I got back over here, after having been on the bench, everybody was on the form.
Right.
And the form's broken down into 6-minute intervals.
Right.
Since I came back, I tried to get it changed to 15 minutes. I mean, who can keep up with 6 minutes?
Right.
And we never have changed. It's still the same. It'd be much simpler if we make it 15 minutes.
I'll
units.
say. I'll say.
It's all over, being used all over the country now. And even the courts condone it because they frequently set fees, and they want to know how many hours did you put on it? What was your rate? For a long time, I wouldn't have a rate, even after I came back to the firm. But I finally had to get a rate. I don't usually quote it, and I don't use it very often. I try to charge, but I'm the only lawyer I guess I can get by with. I try to charge what it's worth, and sometimes it's not worth a lot.
Right.
But that was the way everybody charged in the old days. But they didn't make near as much money. I saw a lawyer in Macon not long ago at my age, and he's got 2 sons in the firm with him, and he was telling me how well they were doing. He said, when you and I came along, we didn't have the hourly rate. But he said, we do well now with it.
I bet.
Yeah.
I bet.
All you have to do is find somebody that can pay it.
That's right.
You'll do well.
Right. Were you active in the Bar Association?
I was
In
in the
the
old days, the old
50s.
bar association. From the time I started practicing law, I started going to the bar. State bar meeting was a big thing then. That was before we had this incorporated bar, and we didn't have sections. It was just one group, and they had a lot of social activities. Usually had a very strong program. One meeting a year, and then a few years after that, they started the midwinter meeting, which they'd have in Atlanta. They still do have that. But once they incorporated it, which in most states was called the integrated bar, but they call it incorporated bar in Georgia, Bar Association changed, and it became more of a regulatory agency. They regulate lawyers now, and you never know from year to year what's going to happen. And it wouldn't surprise me any time for them to say you can't practice with one kind of law. Just what will happen. Whatever the people at the Bar Association, the Board of Governors can think of, that'll be the next thing. I just finished serving on the disciplinary committee to try to change it all. We did change it all after that Mike Bowers case. Hopefully we changed it for the better. But it was, you saw in the paper in the last 2 or 3 days in this Fulton County Daily Report, some lawyer who was on the disciplinary board, they just filed charges against him. That was one of the ones we found out about when we were doing this study.
I read that this morning.
Yeah, they had I went to a bar meeting one time, and they said I heard a report. This was some kind of a Board of Governors meeting, or maybe some of these smaller meetings. And the lawyer made a report and said there was going to be 21 specialties. And there could only be, no lawyer could have more than 3. And I said, I'd like to ask a question. If you're in a small town and you want to represent people, and you want to cover all the specialties, you'd have to get 7 lawyers on a firm. I said, that's right. I said, so that'd be the minimum firm we'd have to have adequate service. I said, that was right. I said, well, this idea will never fly. But they had people studying that, if you can imagine such a thing.
So-called studying. Is that how you met?
Senator Monahan made a statement to me one time about the Supreme Court, in which he asked me, that's when I was Attorney General, if it was true the Supreme Court had ruled that you could furnish books to a parochial school. I said, yeah, they ruled that. He said, but they ruled you can't furnish maps. I said, that's right. He said, imagine grown men did that. Some of the bar association things sometimes sort of remind me of that story.
Right.
But they're doing pretty well. I guess there's so many more lawyers and more problems than there used to be. And the bar association I guess they have the work cut out for them, keeping them under control.
Is that how you met Governor Vandiver, through the Bar Association or through bar contacts?
No, I met Governor Vandiver through friends. I had a friend that I went to Georgia Southwestern with, who later became Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Georgia, named Robert Jordan, Bob Jordan.
Sure.
And he and I were classmates at Georgia Southwestern. We were friends for years, and he roomed with Vandiver at Georgia.
That's right.
Later on, and he and I, he introduced me to Vandiver, as some other people. We all had, when we got out of the Army, we were all sort of doing the same thing. We'd meet each other around at different things.
No, you're talking about people like yourself and Vandiver.
Yeah.
Just starting
Even though
out.
I was in the Marshall Law School, you'd just see each other around at different things. And but I mainly through Bob Jordan I got to know Andy Vandiver.
That's right. And were you involved in in Vandiver's campaign for lieutenant governor in
Yeah.
'54?
I was involved in that. We had about 10 or 12 people that were all friends of Vandiver, and we used to meet fairly often to help him run for lieutenant governor, raise money and do what we could for him. We were not professional politicians. We were all his age.
Right.
And we lived in different parts of Georgia, and we thought we could elect him lieutenant governor, and if we did that, we might elect him governor. Might make a difference someday. We all wondered. We were all interested in the state.
Who else was in that group?
Well, Jim Dunlap at Gainesville, who later became chairman of the Board of Regents. John Langdale in Valdosta, who was a leading citizen down there at Valdosta. Bob Norman from Augusta, who was a lawyer in Augusta. Walter Rylander in Americus. Jim Owen, who later was on the Board of Regents. He's a lawyer in Griffin. I'm trying to think who else in Atlanta was in it. Anyway, it was about 10 of us.
Again, men in their 30s, by and large, who...
Yeah, we were all around 36, 37, something like that. We were, I was 40 when Ernie was 40. I'm the same age as Ernie. I'm 6 months younger than he is. He was 40 when he was elected governor, I think.
Right. Were you involved in the '54 governor's race, the one with all of those candidates too? Like Charlie?
Our firm decided we'd support Fred Ham.
Right. As a speaker.
And that was an ironic thing because one of the candidates was Charlie Gowan, who was later brought into the law firm.
That's right.
And probably we would have supported Charlie if we'd just been free agents, but Fred Ham was the brother-in-law of the Callaways. Casey and Fuller Callaway
right.
were big clients of ours, and at that time they still ran the Callaway Mills. And he was Speaker of the House, and he had done a lot of favors for the firm over the years. And so we had a meeting, and that's the only time, I guess, in the history of the firm we ever had a meeting and decided as a firm to support somebody. Now, we have not, I don't believe we've done that since. Now everybody's on their own. You can do whatever you want to do.
I was going to ask about how usual or unusual that was.
It's very unusual, and it was very unsuccessful.
Well, I know.
So we lost.
Marvin Griffin
got elected, and that was it.
The newspapers supported Fred Hand too, I believe. The Atlanta.
They did, yeah.
newspapers.
Well, he would have been a good governor, but he didn't get out and campaign like Marvin. He stayed Mondale later said that he didn't have the stomach for running for president. I don't think Fred had the stomach for running. It's hard work to run for statewide office. He didn't work that hard at it. Charlie Gowan worked hard, and he made quite a name for himself.
He had the radiothons or
Yeah.
talkathons or whatever they were.
Oh, and he's a great speaker,
Yeah.
Charlie. Still have. We had him. He's 86, 87
Yeah.
years old. We had him speak last Christmas we have a Christmas luncheon for all lawyers and we honored Hugh Spalding Jr., who was retiring, and Charlie spoke. He's still got a sort of a ring in his voice. He's a great speaker.
Right. I've interviewed him for this project. When you say that Fred Hand had done the firm some favors in the past, what
He was
kinds
Speaker of the House.
Yeah.
We had interest clients that might not want some kind of a legislation to be called up. Might have something to do with where which committee would get a bill. Those days it'd be bills introduced to punish people. And we've always historically in this firm looked at our clients, not try to get something through the legislature, force a client, but to protect the clients. One of the things that used to be introduced periodically was called crown tax. You'd put a tax on a crown of a soft drink. But if you put a tax on soft drinks in Georgia, you'd have it all over the United States within a year's time. And a lot of times people would threaten. They'd introduce a bill, some fellow right out of the clear blue, put a 2-cent tax on crown of a soft drink. And that would scare everybody to death. That's the sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And if it went to the right committee, it probably never would come out of the committee. But it had been years before I joined the firm since anybody ever even had a hearing on a crown tax. But it was it wasn't a joke though, it was a serious thing. Mr. Woodruff moved the Coca-Cola company from Georgia to Delaware after having a dispute about taxes. It stayed a few years and then he moved it back. But one time we lost the Coca-Cola company.
Which years were those?
It was during the 30s.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Mr. Troutman and Mr. Sibley both had to go up to Delaware to live.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah, and one of them stayed 2 years, and then the other one stayed 2 years. I think it must have been up there 4 years.
Uh-huh.
Oh, that's funny.
Clients are very sensitive to that sort of thing. And the legislature can do things to people. Single them out, do things to them very easily.
Mm-hmm. Well, now moving to the 58 race, of course, that comes right after the rural roads fight between Vandiver and Griffin in the showdown and in the General Assembly. And I gather you got very quickly very much involved in the Vandiver campaign. And
well, I not as a politician. They never thought I knew anything about politics, any of them, because I was from Atlanta and I hadn't been in the legislature. I was more like a lawyer.
right.
And I'd have to get up position papers on.
Mm-hmm. I gather.
Father them on the law, and wouldn't do what I could politically. But by that time they had Mr. Jim Gillis in there running the campaign.
That's right.
He was, I guess, he was chairman of the highway board too at the time. No,
Not-
Marvin threw him out.
Right.
Yeah. So he was
But
in
he
there
had
running.
been, and he would be.
Yeah, and so
Right.
none of our little group had been sticking with him any since before he was lieutenant governor. None of us had anything to do with running the campaign. And really none of us knew anything about statewide politics. That's when you had the county unit system.
Mm-hmm.
And you didn't have to know but one person in a small county. But there's a person who knew that one person that had the power.
That's right. Well, I gather, though, that you were involved in the decision.
Oh, I was naming those 10 people. I forgot to name Bob Judden. He was one of the ones.
Right.
He was one of the main ones.
Of course, his brother Clarence and Cornelia Farms became an issue in the 58
I know.
race with Bodenhammer.
Kept Bob from being governor. He would have been the next governor after Vandiver. And he decided he didn't want to pursue it because his brother was he was getting so much flack about his brother. And Bob, I always respected Bob and his other brothers for that. They supported it. They stuck with Clarence Judd. And he just gave up the idea of being governor. But he would have been governor, and that opened the way up for Garland Bird, and then Garland collapsed and Carl Sanders got in. And at that time we had a lot of good people that could have been governor. But Bob was one. I should have listed his name in the 10.
Right. but I gather that Reverend
Vandiver.
Bodenhammer kept on mentioning Clarence
Oh, yeah, but
Durden.
that, that was probably, I think undoubtedly the Vandiver group overreacted to that. We didn't have sophisticated polling then. And you'd find out how things were going, you'd stop at a gas station and talk to somebody, call around over the state and ask people that were supposed to be knowledgeable how things were looking in your county, that sort of thing, and didn't have polls. I remember in the Kennedy campaign, Bobby Kennedy asked me if we used polls. I said, man, we haven't ever had a poll in Georgia. We don't know what a poll is.
Hold on just a second.
In 16, Billy Barwick and I and Henry Bowden worked for Sanders.
Well, were you involved on the night where the decision on how to start off the campaign was and the speech for which
No.
Ernie Vandiver became well
No,
known?
not one. No, I was not in that. No, that was became a big problem, and I never have known who was in that group that made that decision.
Well, I gather there were different people counseling different ways.
I never have known that though. I know Peter Zach Gill would have been into it. Bob Russell was in it. Maybe Mr. Gillis. Dixon Oxford. I don't know who was in it. I wasn't in it. And as far as I know, none of my group, our group at 10, had anything at all to do with that.
What about Henry Knox or W.O.
Henry.
Brooks? W.O. Brooks?
Brooks wasn't in our group.
No, I know, but
He's a Talmadge man.
right, I know, but in that decision,
He could have been in there, yeah. Is Brooks still living?
I don't know. I will really need to find. I don't believe he is, but I don't know.
Yeah.
And how about Henry Knox?
I don't know him.
You don't know.
You talking about Henry Neal?
Maybe Henry Neal. Yeah.
N-E-A-L. He's Secretary of the Board of Regents. Yeah. Henry wouldn't have been in that.
Okay.
Henry was more like our crowd. He was a lawyer then in Thompson, Georgia. He was
Right.
with the Knox.
That's right.
It
That's
was
right.
Knox and Neal.
That's what I'm
where you got the
thinking, yeah.
Knox from. And Henry became the Assistant Attorney General, assigned to the governor's office when he got in. And that's how he never left Atlanta. He's been here ever since. And he's the Secretary and Counsel for the Board of Regents. So if I don't think they call him counsel, I don't think the state law allows him to have a lawyer. Attorney General's supposed to furnish him a lawyer.
Right.
But I've always figured he was a lawyer. I think his title is he's secretary. I doubt he was in that.
Okay.
If I had to guess, I'd think it was Peter Zach Gill, Bob Russell,
Right.
Mr. Gillis. And if Brooks was in, Brooks is more like the scrivener. He writes up things. He wouldn't have been the boss of figuring that out. I don't know who would have made that decision, but Peter Zach Gill's still living.
Right.
And Maynard's still living.
Right. No, we've interviewed.
Yeah.
Governor Vandiver.
No, he's.
Well,
He'd tell you.
when you say he may have overreacted, what do you mean?
I said the Vandiver group may have overreacted because Bodenhamer wasn't going anywhere. And it turned out he didn't care for 2 or 3 counties or something like that. But they were, nervous about it, naturally. And they didn't, as I say, they didn't have polling, so you couldn't have any indication of to be certain you were going to win. And that was a big issue. See, to understand how he would have made that speech, you have to understand the times. For example, when in the 54 campaign, when Fred Hand had his opening, he had it either in Albany or Pelham or Camilla.
Camilla's where he's from.
And
Yeah.
Camilla. His main line in his speech was that he would go to Fulton Tower. He would go to Fulton Tower before he would integrate to school. That got to be up. Then they all started talking about everybody was going to Fulton Tower. Wasn't that what they call the jail?
Right.
Fulton Tower. Well, Vandiver had moderated by that time. He wasn't going to allow any black to get into the school, and he got that line, no, not one. Well, by the time he got elected, the Supreme Court decided the second Little Rock case,
That's right.
which said violence was no excuse. And the whole ball game changed.
Well, that strikes me as being a very important case, and certainly you alluded it.
Well, that was where I came into the,
That's right.
that's
the Cooper versus Aaron.
that's where I got started,
Okay.
really, doing something in the Vandiver administration. He had made, by that time, had appointed me chief of staff, which in those days was like having a free lawyer. Up until the time I was chief of staff, there had never had been a non-lawyer have a job except Ivan Allen had it under Ed Rivers.
Mm-hmm.
And the governor wanted something done, didn't want to go through the attorney general, he'd ask the chief of staff to find out about it. That's sort of the way the thing ran. But
Who had been your predecessor as chief of staff?
B.D. Murphy, Powell, Goldstein,
Sure.
Frazier, and Murphy. He was
Buck
Martin
Murphy.
Griffin's chief of
Okay.
staff. Very good too,
Oh yeah.
good lawyer. Well, at any rate, that case was decided, and the Vandiver asked me what we were going to do about this integration, and I said, well, they decided this new case, you're in bad shape. So he appointed me and Murphy and Charlie Block, I think.
And Holcomb Perry, I believe.
Holcomb Perry, yeah, to go around and talk to the governors and attorney generals in the other southern states, see what we could do. And we found out they didn't know as much as we knew. None of them knew anything. They didn't have any. There's no way to, there's really nothing you could do. And so we came back and reported that. And then that's when I thought up the Sibling Commission. And but we'd had a lot of backing and filling during that
Yeah,
time.
let me get to some of that backing
Yeah.
and feeling. First of all, who was Holcomb Perry? He's someone who
He's still living in Albany. He's
Is
a
he?
fine lawyer. One of the better lawyers in Georgia. And he was just that. I mean, that's why he was appointed. He was thought of as a very fine lawyer. And hadn't been affiliated in any sort of politics. Nor had I. And Mr. Block and Mr. Murphy had been very prominent in these fights in the past, you see. So it was like just adding two people to it. But Perry was a fine lawyer, still is. I saw him a few months ago.
he sort of disappears from the scene shortly after this, and I didn't
Well, that's
pick him up.
because he's not a politician.
That's right.
He's just he represents most anybody in South Georgia when they note he's their lawyer. Yeah, he never did have anything to do with politics. He had a partner named Jay Waters who was a good friend of the governor, and I believe the governor might have appointed him something later on. I'm not certain of that, but they may know he was friends.
Had the Norfolk case come up, in the city of Norfolk, Virginia, come up by that time?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't remember that.
Where they did close down the schools.
I didn't know they closed them. I thought they closed two country places in Virginia. The two Virginia cases, but they were later.
Right.
Farmville.
Farmville, Virginia, right. That's one.
What was that county?
Prince George County?
Prince George.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. The big case was the Little Rock case because everyone who was assuming that if you had violence, you just leave everything alone. And of course, that couldn't be the law, but the Supreme Court said it wasn't the law, and and they said it in such a firm language that there was really no outs after that.
Of course, sort of the crux of the whole
Now,
problem.
I understand there was still a lot of things that were done, such as delay. A lot of delay, finally going one grade at a time and all those sort of things.
The whole phrase, with all deliberate speed, of course.
Well, they
is
put that in the decision, and that was as Warren later said, that was a capital error. Nobody knew what that meant. But at the time, and looking back on it, taking time might have been a good thing, because people had to adjust to that. And we could have had all private schools. We could have gone without schools. I guess the federal government could have come in and run the schools, but I doubt at that time they would have ordered you to levy taxes to run schools. After all, we went 40 years after the Civil War without any schools. My father's father had a teacher living in the house. If you wanted to educate your children, you had to go get a teacher somewhere. And later in life, I met the teacher.
Is that right?
Yeah. He was running a bank by that time up in North Georgia somewhere.
Huh.
But he lived in my father's house, my father's family home, and taught him. Judge Bell on the Supreme Court's name was Reverend Chestnut Bell, and he was named for Professor Chestnut, who lived in their house,
Okay.
over in Webster County, Georgia.
Okay.
So we didn't think about thinking about it now. It seems unthinkable that we would not have schools, but that's what the Sibling Commission was debating. Should we close public schools, not have schools?
I was telling Cliff just in terms of how thinkable it was that on our street in northeast Atlanta, all the mothers and a number of us were the same age, 8 or 9 years old. We met in somebody's basement and we allocated teaching responsibilities among the mothers. That's how sure they were that they were going to close the schools and we were going to have class in this lady's basement, and my mother was going to teach English and some other lady was going to teach math right here in Atlanta.
Yeah, and if we'd have had a vote on closing the schools, by a popular vote, they'd have been closed. That was the idea of the Sibling Commission, was to let people sort of blow off steam and get some sort of a direction that the General Assembly could follow. And then the governor, Vandiver never got any credit for the leadership he afforded the state. He should have been they should have built a monument to him for the things. After having said no, not one, and having it, I saw him. I was in the governor's mansion when he had everybody of any importance in the state government over there. The legislature was in session, and the University of Georgia was on order to be integrated, and they all thought he was going to close the university. He called these people in there, and I'll never forget it. It was really a brilliant thing. He called. He said he'd call them to tell them goodbye. That he knew they'd all want to resign. That he had concluded, after much thought, that he was not going to close the University of Georgia. But he told Mr. Gillis, he said, "Mr. Gillis, we've been together, Mr. Jim, been together a long time, and I know you'll be disappointed in me. I know you'll be leaving." And he told Dixon Oxford goodbye, and he told Roy Harris, and he kept going around the room. And finally, Frank Twitty from South Georgia said, "Where are we going?" "I'm not going anywhere." Carl Sanders, the whole works was sitting in there. And before they got through, they all said, "Well, we'll just stick with you." And then after that, they got all the laws changed. But if any hadn't called that meeting and tell them all goodbye, God knows what would have happened.
Frank Twitty had been around the state.
That's leadership.
Yeah.
But I think it wasn't an employee. I mean, he was sincere about it. He thought they'd be too embarrassed and disappointed in him to stay with him, and they all had jobs they could resign from, and most of them didn't really need the job they had. Well-to-do people. But yeah, Twitty. I'm pretty sure it was Twitty who said, "Where are we going?"
Right. Well, Twitty was one who said, "Let's keep the schools open," if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, I think it was. And I know Carl.
And I know Carl Sanders.
Carl Sanders did. He spoke out. But see,
well,
they went in the hardcore. Particularly Carl was not in the hardcore. He was from Augusta, young lawyer. But you say you're talking to Mr. Gillis and Dixon Oxford and people like that. I mean, that is a tough crowd.
How did
Mr. Gillis and Dixon Oxford called me over there one time at the highway department and told me I was running on it. He said, you're turning them into a liberal. I said, I didn't know I was a liberal. I said, you're as liberal as you can get. That's all about this school business.
Right. How did Governor Vandiver get the wherewithal or make that decision to keep the university open and to bring everybody in?
Nobody else could make it but him. That's what you get when you run for governor. You have to make these hard decisions. And he had not only had to, he had to come off his word. Like President Bush is reading my lips.
Right.
When you say things and then he had to come off that. That's why he was a very brave man. And he appointed the Sibling Commission. He didn't get credit for it because he didn't want any credit. He just wanted to see how it would turn out. And we got Busbee. Have you interviewed Busbee?
We have, and I'd like to hear your version of all of that.
Busbee kidded me about that. His office right down the hall, Busbee, Vandiver didn't want any to get mixed up in the Sibling Commission. He didn't think a whole lot of it, but I got it up at my house. I wrote the thing out one night on Habersham Road where I used to live, and I took it over there to him, and then he got Murphy and Block and Perry to look at it. They didn't think too much of it, but Perry thought it was a good idea. So George had just been elected to the legislature from that's the same town, Albany.
Right.
And I don't know if Holcomb, I think it was not Holcomb, I think it was Gray, Jim Gray, asked George Busbee to introduce this resolution. This was a resolution. And I didn't know how it happened, but the governor told me George was going to introduce it. So they had this party, and it's probably still doing some hotel around here, but in those days it was at the Henry Grady Hotel. They'd have a big supper every Sunday night when the legislature came back in town. So I went up there and Busbee got me and said, you and the governor are about to ruin me. I said, what's the problem? He said, man, I can't introduce this resolution. Had it in his pocket. And he said, people in Albany will run me out of the county. And I said, well, George, someday you may want to be governor yourself. And you don't know how all this is going to turn out. And this may be one of the greatest things you've ever done. He said, it's the worst thing I've ever gotten into. Well, years went by, and I'd see George every now and then. I tried to get him to run for lieutenant governor one time, and he wouldn't run. And he ran for governor. First thing I knew, he was out on the stump telling the blacks what all he's done for them. You know, he introduced the Sibling Commission resolution and all that. So every time I'd see him, I'd say something to him about it, about being ruined by that resolution. Really, they probably elected him governor. That one thing.
How did they pick Busbee to introduce the resolution?
He was just from that county, Doherty County, and that's where Gray lived. And Gray probably had helped him get elected. He probably had a newspaper. Gray owned a newspaper.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And he probably helped George get elected. And they were, I don't know who asked him to do it. The governor probably asked Gray to get Busbee to do it. I never did. If I knew, I'd forgotten, but maybe Perry may have gotten him.
So how did...
But we wouldn't have had anything to do with it. You know, I wrote in the names of organizations, not people. And I didn't leave it to chance who'd be on the commission. And that question got down to who was going to be the chairman. And the governor told me he'd like to get Mr. Sibley. So I had to go see Mr. Sibley to get him lined up to do it, talk him into it. And I said, do you remember you president of any kind of an organization? Because that's the way we had them all listed, see, president of Georgia Farm Bureaus, right, so forth. And he said, yeah, I'm president of the University of Georgia Alumni Society. So we put that right in the resolution.
That's a natural.
And so that's how, then of course these people put somebody, I don't know who told them, but some of the people on there said, why don't we make Mr. Sibley chairman? The whole idea, you had to have a strong chairman. Right. It had been a flop. I mean, it had been, the West had been chaotic if we hadn't gotten a good chairman. It was bad enough as it was. It was hard going, and then when they got ready to vote, it was really an imbalance where the...
It was 11-8, the vote was.
Yeah. One time I thought maybe it might not even, Mr. Sibley's side might lose. It was pretty close.
So you did not go in there with the knowledge that the conclusion was...
Oh no, and neither did the governor. I mean, this was an open thing. And the governor was hoping that Mr. Sibley's side would win. But it was tough going to know that. And people were really, people were really stirred up, particularly in South Georgia. They just raised hell at these meetings. And that's why I think if we'd have had a vote on it by the people, they would have closed the school. Mr. Sibley talked with them about that, and tell them we had to integrate the schools, but we had to close them. And it'd be a bad thing not to have public education.
Did you ever have any contact in those years with the representatives of the Hope organization here?
Oh, I knew what Pam Lopez's wife was head of it.
Yeah,
I knew him
right.
extremely well.
So you had contact with them,
Oh, yeah, I had contact with them. I had contact with all the black leaders.
right?
Yeah, I've had meetings with back in those days with all the black leaders in town come over to King and Spalding's office over here. We go across over here where the bank is, the old building. And Dr. Yates,
Clayton Yates, right?
yeah, the man that ran the bank, what is his name?
Milton.
Milton. A.T. Walden. Talmadge used to call him Austin Walden.
That's right.
A.T. Walden. Yeah, and about 10 or 12 of them.
Mr. Cochran, I know.
Yeah, Cochran, and one of them, Cochran testified for me when I was
That's
up
right,
for
I saw
Attorney
that.
General. And then, some of the educators.
Who initiated those talks and what went on
They
there?
wanted to meet with the governor. As soon as Vandiver got in to be governor, they said they wanted to meet with him. And he didn't know what they wanted to meet about, and didn't know what was going to come of the meeting, and so he sent them a message that they ought to meet with me. And I met with them. It was sort of like a screening. I was meeting with them to see what it was they had in mind. And what they wanted to do was send their children to not the public schools, but the colleges. And Dr. Yates, I'll never forget, said when I passed by Georgia Tech, there are people, and he was very light-skinned, I see people walking around there with skin much darker than mine, who are not even Americans that are in school there, and I can't send my children there. I said, there's something wrong. And I said, well, I couldn't agree with you more. But, that's the law right now, so something can be done about it. And that was the general theme of the thing. They weren't giving up on anything, but they were complaining. And they had a just complaint. And that was, of course, for the university. And year two, or
Right.
3 or 4 even before we
Right.
integrated the common school.
Right.
But these were the leader. This was the black leadership, and probably things could have been done a little differently where they needed a victory. If they were going to stay in a position of leadership.
That's right, because there's
And
a
of course they lost out. Martin Luther King group
whole
started, and the sit-in
another
started, and all that sort
generation,
of thing.
right?
And NAACP took over, and there was nobody even to negotiate with.
It all changed.
And that's what they said. I'll never forget it. They said we gonna have to have a victory.
Huh.
We're gonna lose our position of leadership, and they did.
I've heard the name of an undertaker from Cedartown, Robert Parks,
Yeah.
mentioned. What was his role?
Parks was Talmadge's man. He was on Talmadge's. He had a big political following, and was always supported of Senator Talmadge, and probably had a role with Vandiver. I don't know. He wasn't in these meetings, and I don't know what role he had. So far as I know, he wouldn't have had any big leadership role in these decisions, in the decisional process.
At any time, did Senator Talmadge or Senator Russell, for that matter, take any part in any of these discussions?
No, that I know of.
No consultation
If they-
with the governor's office?
But if they wanted to talk to anybody, they wouldn't talk with me. They'd talk to Vandiver.
Right.
Vandiver was married to Senator Russell's niece, and he had been Talmadge's campaign manager, so it wasn't any. It was locked in.
That's right.
They could have talked with him, but I would have heard about it. I don't think they were talking about it. This was not something the politicians wanted to get mixed up in. This was a tough problem, and very unlikely to come out of it whole once you got into it. But look at Vandiver. He's never gotten any credit for any of this. And if somebody starts talking about this era, all they talk about is a no, not one pledge.
You, I think in your confirmation hearings, you referred to that meeting at the mansion around the university as a, quote, badly divided meeting. Maybe you could discuss a little bit more about what went on there, other than what Vandiver said. And
Well, that was all preliminary. Would have been, I meant badly divided because we had some people that, like Carl Sanders, that would have had a view of not closing the university. And not doing away with public education. And I've forgotten the others, maybe Twitty, I don't know who.
Right.
But the majority would have had a different view.
Peter
They were
Zach Gear
hanging
you're
tough.
talking about.
Peter Zach Gill would have been in there, but
Yeah.
he was, of course, he's working for Vandiver, so he didn't have any independent status. Some of these other fellows did. They wanted in the legislative leaders. They were not elected by.
Right.
They were elected by their own
Right.
members, and some of those were appointed by Vandiver, like highway people.
Right.
Revenue commissioner was Oxford,
Right.
but they were divided. Yeah, but they were. But if I said badly divided, I probably didn't say it right. It was one-sided.
Now, do you know of any conversations at that time during the university crisis? Of course, it's right at the time of the Kennedy inauguration, or right a few days before or something. But were there conversations from Washington to the governor's mansion?
Yeah, I don't know what they were, but the governor talked with Bobby Kennedy fairly often, and he also talked with the president from time to time. Yeah, he sent me to the inauguration. I represented him at the inauguration. He didn't go. Legislature was in session, and
That's right.
this was that same year when everything was happening.
This is like almost the same week, almost.
Yeah,
as
and I went to the inauguration and enjoyed it very much. That's one of the best emoluments I got out of being chief of staff. I had a naval aids and automobile and the whole bit. Good tickets to everything.
Let me go back to your relationship with the Kennedys. I saw that you had been a delegate in the Georgia delegation at the Los Angeles convention.
Right.
And maybe you could describe the convention first, and we'll get into the campaign a bit.
Well, it was probably the most interesting convention we've had in a long time. I doubt we had one since like that. It was open, and there were a number of good candidates. Adlai Stevenson had the galleries, which were orchestrated by the Hollywood people. Even met Roosevelt in to stir them up. And then the Kennedys had their group, and Lyndon Johnson had his, and Stuart Simonton
Stuart Simonton.
was
Right.
a candidate, and George Smathers was a candidate. We had a Georgia caucus. We had Kennedy and Johnson both a pair at the caucus, and they were the leading candidates. Kennedy, with his usual wit, said that he couldn't spare Lyndon as a majority leader. Said the nation can't spare him, and I can't spare him. Let's just leave him where he is. And we had a lawyer from Albany by the name of Texas Smith that Vandiver wouldn't make a delegate because he said he was partisan. He'd been all working for Kennedy up West Virginia and around. And when Kennedy came in the room, in a very crowded room, he said, "Where's Taxi? Texas Smith. Where's Texas Smith?" Taxi was over in the corner somewhere. He wasn't a delegate, but he was in the room. He held his hand up. Kennedy said something nice about him. Everybody cheered. That's sort of the way the thing started. And it was nice. I think we also had Simonton in there at one point. Listen to him. And Senator Russell asked Vandiver to try to get the whole delegation committed to Johnson. So on the first ballot, we voted for Johnson. And on the second ballot, we were about evenly split between Stevenson and Kennedy. I don't think anyone else would have gotten any votes. Johnson would only gotten a bare handful of votes. We almost were down the line for Stevenson or Kennedy. I was for Kennedy. And we never got to vote. It only went one ballot.
That's right. Wasn't there some issue about the Georgia delegation not voting to make it unanimous, or do you remember anything about that?
I don't know anything about that.
Now, your old friend,
I can't imagine we did that.
I don't think it happened. I think it was rumored that it might happen.
Oh, no. Yeah, I don't know.
Your friend and acquaintance and partner, Bobby Troutman, had been with the Kennedy forces in fairly significant ways.
He roomed with Joe Kennedy at the Harvard Law School. But he had always been with the Kennedys. Yeah. And he was right there working for the Kennedys at the convention.
A fairly substantial role, as I recall.
Oh yeah. He was almost like the operations manager. I guess he was. He had a big role.
Yeah, I think he had headed up the command post at the hotel and also the floor demonstration.
I
I
didn't
think
know
he was in charge
what
of
he was
that.
doing, but he was doing something.
And then there was the civil rights fight at that convention too. What do you recall about that?
Nothing. I recall
the
meeting with
planks.
Bobby Kennedy when something about that, but I don't remember what it was.
You know anything about the meeting with the Southern governors and Jack Kennedy?
I know, yeah, I knew about the meeting. I was not invited, but I knew about it. Yeah. They, you know, there's a lot of backing and filling going on around there, but Kennedy was, he decided that the way to win was to get Johnson. And of course, that infuriated a lot of the liberals from other parts of the country. Soapy Williams was one of the main ones who got upset. And Kennedy was very much of a pragmatist. He later, it turned out that Soapy ended up being that roving ambassador to Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And people around the South thought that was a great thing. After the way he objected to Johnson, you know.
But it's pretty,
Oh, I read
it's
that.
pretty grim.
I had my gallbladder.
I read the first
gallbladder
one.
taken out about a month ago, and I've been reading a lot of books. And I read that one. It's awful.
Mm.
It's almost like the biography of his opponent.
It's like Coach Stevenson's a saint on earth or something.
Right.
I mean, Lyndon's the embodiment of all evil.
I read the first volume. I'm looking forward to reading the second one. But,
It's sort of black and white, and then
I've
Lyndon is
never read
painted
anything
black.
about the way anybody, how bad anyone treated the wife the way you treated everybody. God, it's awful.
well, after the convention, how did you become the campaign chair? I guess you were co-chair with George L. Smith.
I was co-chair with George L. Smith, who was Speaker of the House. Governor Vandiver asked us to do it, and he talked with Russell and Talmadge, and they agreed on the two of us. And then Vandiver sent me to meet with Kennedy. I went with Kennedy. I went up to the Senate and met with him in the Sergeant at Arms office, and Vandiver told me to have certain understandings with him about who could speak for him in Georgia, because we had a lot of other people organized in different groups to be for him, and we got the agreement was that only Vandiver, George L. Smith, of me could speak.
As opposed to, for instance, the Democratic Forum.
Anybody, as opposed to anybody.
Charles Weltner, Ivan Allen.
Any group.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And he agreed to that, and no problem about it. And I've got a picture made, I don't know where it is, made at that time with him. I'll never forget he asked me if what my religion was, and I said a Baptist. And he said, does it embarrass you to support a Roman Catholic? And I said, no, it really doesn't, but it embarrasses me that you'd ask me that. So it sort of, doesn't speak well for our country. Later on, the Baptists all got behind him after he made that Houston speech on religion.
How did you overcome that issue, the suspicion of his Catholicism in the campaign
I don't
here?
know. I guess he overcame it. I mean, he was just a good candidate. But we had a lot of Baptists. My preacher, for example, was, he'd tell me about talking to other Baptist preachers, and they all liked Kennedy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was, thinking of another era, that the Pope might have something to do with running politics, because we had a Catholic as a governor. I don't think anybody got a much more sophisticated, educated voting population now.
Well, okay, in
We
1960.
might have some people that don't know what to vote for at all, but the ones that know, I think they'd know that the Pope wasn't going to run the country.
In 1960, though, what were your campaign strategies and tactics in Georgia? What kind of campaign did
Ty
you
Kennedy to Roosevelt. That was our strategy, and we had the largest majority in the nation.
Right.
We started him off by having him speaking at Warm Springs. We got a speechwriter who had was of the vintage of Roosevelt, Ed Bridges, and he's a brilliant speechwriter, and he wrote a lot of things about Roosevelt. And we had parades all through that area down there and around Warm Springs, and it just tied Roosevelt, Kennedy right together. Then after that, all we had to do was just organize, and we had one thing that sort of scared us was Nixon had a noonday rally down here to Haight Park. Had a huge crowd. I went over there to see it. I went up in the Haight building. And I thought, how we going to get beat if we're not careful here? So we organized every congressional district through the congressmen. We got the members of Congress to give us a list of their chief supporters. And then out of those, we'd pick out 2 or 3 congressional district managers. And then they had to organize every county. And when we got through, we had the state organized. We had Senator Russell, Senator Talmadge, and all the congressmen helping. That'll never happen again, I don't suppose.
Right.
But that was one time it did happen, and we had a huge majority.
Looking at the papers at that time, it seems that the Warm Springs rally really gave the campaign momentum here.
It did. Yeah, well, you have to have a theme on a campaign. That's one of the problems with the governor's race right now. We don't seem to be having any themes, and the public doesn't seem to care. I think to have a theme, I think the public has to care too.
Who are some of the other sort of inner circle members of the Kennedy campaign in Georgia? The in-crowd, the key planners and strategists?
George L. Smith. But after the Martin Luther King incident of getting Dr. King out of jail, there was a lot of flap about that, and George L. Smith had an opponent. He was up here helping with the Kennedy campaign, and after that happened, he decided he better go back to Swainsboro and get himself reelected. So, but he kept working some, but he had to go back to Swainsboro and spend a lot of his time. We had, of course, anybody in the Vandiver group was working on it.
Mm-hmm.
And we had all these congressmen helping.
Pardon me, Ms. Adler's on the phone.
Okay, oh, excuse me, say. Catch a plane.
Okay, well, I would like to hear your account of the Martin Luther King arrest and the phone calls, because your story has never been told. And
I don't know a thing about it.
And that's why your story's never been told.
Exactly right. I had nothing to do with it. The governor handled it.
Okay, you were.
Governor handled it, and of course there's 2 or 3 other groups in town claim they handled it.
There are more than a few people on both the local and the state scene.
I think if you talk, did the governor tell you about it?
He has talked about it.
Yeah, well, he handled it. There's no doubt he handled it. And he handled it for the Kennedys. There's no doubt about that. And there's no doubt that he got the judge. He had Bob Russell talk to the judge. And I mean, that's all there is to it. And
Let me ask you a couple of
and
questions.
all the other folks can claim all they want to claim. And they
Right,
might have
right.
been hoping and all that, but the man that actually did the job was the governor of Georgia, and his brother-in-law, Bob Russell.
What about George Stewart?
George Stewart, he may have called the judge. He might have had something to do with it. He was always sort of around, and maybe Russell talked with him. Maybe he talked to the judge. I don't know. But
What about Osgood Williams? Have you ever heard anything of him?
I never heard his name mentioned. Was he on the bench then?
No.
Where was it?
He was
Practicing law in
practicing
Atlanta?
law in Atlanta.
I never heard his name mentioned.
Okay.
The first one I heard said he handled the whole thing with Mayor Hartsfield.
Mayor Hartsfield certainly claimed
Then
it.
after that,
Morris Abram.
Morris Abrams, and he handled it. And,
All right. Well, let's back up though to the actual.
And all I know about it is it happened. And I was called and told about it.
Okay, the original arrest happens at Rich's, and
I don't know. I didn't even know about that. They arrest somebody about civil rights demonstrations all during the day and night. And Martin Luther King at that time had not become the man he later became. And
although
I found a quote by you at that time in the papers. You know that Senator Kennedy would never interfere in the affairs of a sovereign state,
Yeah.
and that's after after Hartsfield has leaked incorrectly that he has gotten Senator Kennedy, talked to Senator Kennedy, and that he had intervened in the case. Then I saw the statement that you had.
But he didn't intervene. He, in the sense, in a legal sense, he talked with the governor to see if there's anything he could do to help. You know, it wasn't like he took over the state government or filed a petition for writ of habeas corpus or anything like that. And he didn't interfere in the affairs of a sovereign state. He talked with the governor, got the governor to do it. So that's what I've said. I mean, we were hard put right there running the campaign.
Oh, I know. That's what I'm talking about.
Votes.
I'm trying to get it to where you were as the campaign chair with all the swirling around you at that time.
I went to Rome, Georgia that night for some reason, and people were raising hell. I remember that. I mean, wondering what was going on. I didn't know anything but to tell them.
This Hartsfield announcement must have caught you blindside when Hartsfield.
Well, it did, and I think that's a statement I made, but I didn't remember making that. But that sounds like something I said. I left and went to Sea Island, Georgia, and I was down at the hotel. Bobby Kennedy called me and said, "How are things going?" I said, "Not too well, I don't think, but I'm not certain how they're going." He said, "Well, I think they're going to be a lot better than the rest of the country, and I hope it won't be too bad now." Something like that. And it was just a light conversation. And I told him when I got back I'd assess the situation. This was on like a Saturday or Sunday.
Right.
And it sort of calmed down.
Well, I saw.
I don't remember it lasting. It was sort of like a 2 or 3 day story.
Yeah. I saw. Well, there's sort of 2 chapters of it. There's the Rich's chapter, and then there's the Judge Mitchell's
getting
report.
out of jail, being sentenced to jail, sent to Reedsville. That was a shocking thing.
Right.
And then getting out. I would imagine that people of Georgia were shocked by having him sent down to Reedsville just for such a minor offense.
Was that? What did you feel?
I can't remember how I felt, but I know I would have been shocked at sending anybody to Reedsville like he wasn't a common criminal, hadn't robbed a bank or anything, for God's sakes.
Okay, I read Harris Wofford's book, Kennedys and Kings, and he has his account. I don't know if you've ever seen it or not.
But I think I have. Harris was a friend of mine. I think
he, at first.
Did he know anything about it?
Well, he has his version of the story too.
I knew him well when he was at the White House.
And according to Wofford, he argued for a strong public statement from Kennedy. And then here's a quote: "But the telephone lines between Washington and Georgia were soon buzzing with protests from Governor Vandiver, Griffin Bell, and others around the South."
I don't know what I never talked to anybody in Washington at all until Bobby Kennedy called me at Sea Island.
Okay.
I don't know when that was. It may have been the next day, 2 days later.
Then
That's
concerning the statement, the sentence, or the time in Reedsville and so forth. This is Wofford again. He says, "Bell, however, was a fair man and was shocked by the 4-month sentence. He thought King should be freed on bail and prepared a more moderate draft to that effect."
I don't remember preparing any draft. That would have been my feeling. Yeah,
Okay.
There's no doubt about that. I mean, you just don't treat people that way.
Okay. Anyway, this is Wofford's recollection, and I was just trying to.
Yeah. Well, I knew Wofford during the campaign. I knew him during the time that he was over in the White House, and I know him since then. He's been president of Bryn Mawr, and he's
Right. That's right.
yeah. I don't know what he's doing right now, but I went out to Aspen one time to one of the Aspen Institute programs with him.
Mm-hmm.
He was at the same time I was.
And then, according to Wofford, and this is again his version of a story, and it's so complicated, I almost thought of bringing you a chart showing everybody's version.
There's been several different versions of how President Kennedy reacted.
That's right.
There's some stories that he didn't want to interfere with Martin Luther King. He didn't want to have anything to do with it.
Right.
His campaign people have really got it. Maybe I was in Harris's book. I believe I read his book. Go ahead and give me that quote, the next one.
Well, the next one is he is saying Vandiver is said to have promised to get King out if there is no further statement from the national campaign or from the Kennedys, and I don't know where.
Well, that would have probably been natural because they didn't want to lose a lot of votes.
But you're saying you were in Sea Island, or what kind of?
No, I went to, when this happened, the night it happened, or the day it
The
happened.
first arrest, right?
Not the arrest, the day when they arranged to get him out of Reedsville.
Okay.
I was in, for some reason I had to go to Rome, Georgia, probably to a political meeting. And I remember I was hard put because I didn't know any of the details. And I was just sort of winging it. And then I didn't hear anything from anybody. And it must have been 2 days before I heard from Bobby Kennedy. And when he called, he wanted to know how things were going.
And this was after
After he was
King
out
had
of jail.
been released on bail.
Yeah. Yeah, we wanted to get the reaction.
Yeah, I read.
That's my best. That's all I can remember about it.
Yeah. I read an interview with Bobby Kennedy that was in the Kennedy Library and done in I think '64, where he couldn't remember who, but he thought that it was you who called him up and said the governor wants to talk with you. But according to what you're saying, it was not.
Wasn't me. Probably Bobby Russell. Could have very well been Bob Russell, who's now deceased.
Okay.
But I don't know who it was. It was not me though.
Okay. So as you've learned of that story, outside of
I might, but I hasten to say, I think to handle it well, they arranged to get him out of Reedsville.
right.
And sending him there would not have been anything that anybody in any high authority would have known anything about, really. Would have caused, or could have prevented it.
Who is the they that you're
What do you
referring
mean,
to?
they?
When you say they arranged to get him out of Reedsville, the they
The
is
governor.
the governor.
Yeah, the governor. I mean, give him some credit for what he's
All right.
done in life. He got him out.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody else. And they wouldn't have dared gotten him out if the governor hadn't set the thing in motion. Now, Hartsfield might have tried to get him out or something, but he couldn't have got him out.
Right. So
And you'd have had to go to the Supreme Court of Georgia and try to get some kind of a order.
right.
Now, in those days, that'd have been hard to do.
Outside of contacting Bobby Kennedy, what, to your knowledge, did the governor do to?
I don't know that he contacted Bobby Kennedy. You just told me
Okay.
that.
But okay.
I had always understood that either Bobby or the president, I think Bobby called the governor.
All right.
This
might have been
this is
Senator
news to
Kennedy.
me that the governor would have called him. I doubt very much he called him.
Okay.
I think they must have called him. In fact, every version I've ever heard was they called him.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And that's the only thing that really makes any logical sense. He wouldn't have been going out and getting into that. He might have called me and said, what's this going to do to the campaign? Well, in those days, you must have in mind that nearly all the blacks voted for the Republicans. They didn't vote for Democrats. This is the first time
That's right.
that the Democrats got the black vote.
That's
And it
right.
was on account of this incident, is what historians now think. And people thought that at the time. So
The black vote was
the
60-40.
Democrats wouldn't have been too worried about losing the black vote. So that's another reason I don't think he called. And he didn't call me
Okay.
about it.
And what kind of?
I think somebody called, the best I can remember reading several books, there's somebody called the Kennedy administration, the Kennedy group, some black, maybe Ms. King or somebody like that, I don't know who it was. Somebody, and said what they'd done to Dr. King and see if you can't help. So we need help. Now, who was that?
It could have been Lewis Martin. I don't know.
I don't know who it was. I don't know who it. I thought it was somebody in Georgia.
Maybe so. Okay.
Yeah.
So what kind of communication were you in with the governor at that time, over that week or a few days or whatever, a flurry of?
I don't know. I don't know. I talked to him almost every day about something, but I didn't know anything about any of this, and neither did George L. Smith. And George L. Smith was in Fayetteville, Georgia, as I recall, stopped at a gas station to get an early edition of the Journal and read about it.
And I bet almost had a heart attack.
And got a lot of credit. And that's when he went to Swainsboro to see about his election.
What effect did you think that had on the state campaign?
None. Turned out it didn't have any, except we got the black vote.
Except in the city of Atlanta, which still went for Nixon Lodge.
It did?
Yeah.
But I don't remember it having any effect. I remember it just being something that lasted a few days. Historically, it's a big thing, but in the nuances of the campaign, it wasn't a great thing.
Now that brings up a question about the Kennedy campaign, because certainly Teddy White describes it as being a well-oiled, centralized machine, and then there are other accounts that give a very different picture. From your working in the campaign, how would you describe the Kennedy campaign as it worked? You know,
I thought it was I wouldn't call it a well-oiled machine, but it seemed to me to be very well organized. Understand, I've never been in a national campaign before, so I don't have anything to compare it with, but I never had any problem at all getting through to Bobby Kennedy. He was campaign manager, and I could always get him, but I didn't have to deal with anyone else. I didn't call very often, but I could get him, and it was set up well. They were superbly organized at the convention. I mean, they had all the hotel rooms and automobiles tied up out there for a long time in advance. They could help you get a car, get a room, anything like that. Yeah, they were good operators.
I gather you were considered for Deputy Attorney General once Bobby was sworn in and Jack was sworn in there.
I didn't know it. I'd be glad to know that. But
and then got on the bench the first year.
I did.
And then within a year ruled on the county unit system.
Right.
Maybe you could talk about, that would be the last thing we talk about, is the county unit system and the reapportionment cases.
Well, of course, the county unit system was difficult matter because I was growing up under the county unit system, and I fought the since Talmadge, when he was governor, I was with a group of young lawyers that fought putting the county unit system in the Georgia Constitution.
So you were involved in the Strike One in 1950.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I was a lawyer in Savannah. I was, that's the only thing I'd ever done against the county unit system, but I guess I'd think at least half the people in Georgia thought it was an unfair system. But that had nothing to do with your ruling. When you're on the bench, you have to follow precedents. And I thought the Baker versus Cog clearly gave us jurisdiction. Once you get into jurisdiction, you have to get into equal protection, for example, under the 14th Amendment, and there wouldn't be any equal protection of the law, possibly on a county unit system in measuring or weighing a vote. So I didn't have any great trouble with it. Judge Hooper was on that. Judge Hooper was from South Georgia, the same town I was from. Two people from Americus, Georgia on that. And Judge Tuttle. And it was a big case in the sense of big public interest, courtroom filled with people, courtroom still filled when we rendered the decision. I wrote the opinion, as I recall. And I didn't after that have I didn't get a lot of criticism from people, people in politics that I'd known. I never heard any of them saying anything much about it. I never heard anything about it one way or the other.
Well, Baker v. Carr kind of set the...
Yeah, I mean, I think after Baker versus Carr, people probably had a pretty good view that it wouldn't stand up.
I've heard...
And there were a lot of people talking about amending it to make it fairer. A lot of public debate about that, and nobody did anything.
Well, wasn't your decision or your opinion...
My decision was based on the idea if they'd make it fair. In proportion to the population, they could have a county unit system.
And the Supreme Court...
Knocked that total out. By that time, they'd gone on to the one one.
One man, one vote.
I think it started out with one man, later changed to one person, one vote. Yeah. Yeah, and they knocked out all kinds of laws after that. In retrospect, if you had the same court we have now, I think they'd probably uphold what we wrote. There's nothing wrong with having units if it's fair. I mean, what's a districting? It's the same thing as we have in these districts now. They're imposing districts on everybody. So it's the same kind of thing.
Single member districts, at-large districts, etc.
Yeah, I mean, your minority vote in a district doesn't count for anything. You lost. Be the same as a unit. But anyway, they knocked the whole thing out.
And then, though, you and Judge Tuttle, and who was the third one, presided in Toombs versus Fortson over the...
What was that about? That was congressional redistricting.
Was it congressional first, or was it the legislative?
I can't remember. We had so many of those cases. We had congressional districting, we had legislative redistricting 4 or 5 times. And we went through it was almost like school integration, arguing about deliberate speed. We went through several decisions on what variances mean. How much variance could you have? It had to be 10%, 5%, no variance. And finally the Supreme Court held it there could be no variance. And nobody would have, at first we started out giving some consideration to geography. For example, whether people are on one side of the mountain or the other, and whether an area is divided by a river, and that might cause a variance. And they said you couldn't have any variance at all. And if you go in Louisiana, where you have whole sides of counties divided by rivers, no bridges even, and you could have a need for variances, but they finally ruled you couldn't have a variance. So we had to redistrict the state several times, at least 3 times, I think. Toombs versus Fortson, that was been the first state case, I guess.
I think so, yeah.
And then we had this, another case we had was a suit brought to challenge the runoff requirement.
That's right, a suit incidentally brought by Congressman Young, right? Or not?
Well, he was in the group.
He was in the group.
And, we said that they didn't have a live case. It was hypothetical. They'd have to wait till till the black had the majority, and then they could bring it back. So I don't know what the judge is going to hold now.
It's ironic.
I still think that's a sound ruling. And you know who might be the first victim of the new law? My candidate.
Your candidate.
Well, Young. Wouldn't that be something that...
Well, your career has spanned...
A group of blacks brought a suit to do away with majority law, and then the first one that knocked out was Andy Young. So, but hopefully he'll be in the lead. But if he's in second place, Miller will get it without a runoff, according to what Judge Freeman rules. Under my theory, that wouldn't be a live case.
That's right.
It'd only be a live case
after the election.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
was a 3-judge district court, however, and it's not binding on Judge Freeman.
Now, of course, when the legislature or the Justice Department engages in reapportionment, it's really a bloodletting, and I'm wondering what it was like, the first time.
It was, I remember one time the main witness for the state was George Busbee. He still talks about how I mistreated him in that case. They brought in some kind of a plan that wouldn't, by that time you couldn't have a variance, and they'd always have variances, different kind. It was quite a serious thing, because some of them were going to lose their seats. And then later on, they reduced the size of the legislation, and it still needs reducing some more. We got too many members in the House. And they did cut it down to 20. And that caused some more unrest because people lost their seats.
You weren't involved with that one, though.
No, we didn't cut that down. They did it themselves.
That was later, right.
Were you? Why they did, but they cut it down to 20.
You were, however, involved in the famous incident with Denny Groover, and the clock. That was during one of these reports.
No, he was the floor leader for Marvin Griffin.
I know. I meant, but later in the '60s when he held the clock back, broke the clock.
That was a reapportionment.
Yeah.
They were arguing about it. We later got that case,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ham Loki told me a story.
I think one of the reapportionment decisions, I drew the districts. Got a map in the conference room, started drawing them myself somewhere or another. We ain't getting, that's probably we ain't getting anywhere. Ham said what?
He had a story of you listening in from your hospital bed during one of the sessions.
I had a slip desk out in St. George's Hospital, and the lawyers were arguing one of these cases. I don't know what it was. This was right after I got on the bench. I don't think it was an apportionment case.
Okay.
It's some kind of a state case, though, because B.D. Murphy was a lawyer. Yeah, and they decided they'd let me listen in from the hospital bed on a speakerphone. Yeah, and I would be asking questions from the hospital room. It was eerie sort of thing. But I've forgotten the humor of it. Ham's always sees some humor in everything. Whatever he said, I'll agree with.
I'm curious, in both the county unit cases and in the segregation cases, did people realize that sort of legally they were at the end of the road? That these two foundations of a certain way of life, were...
No, I don't think so. People didn't get that excited about anything but the schools. Now, the schools are quite a different matter. Schools involves your children and the ability of the children to compete in a modern, much shrunken world, where you competing with people from other parts of the country who have better education facilities than you have, and that's a serious matter. And I went through that in all the 6 states of the Fifth Circuit, and that is highly emotional. Still is. Look out in DeKalb County right now.
Yeah.
Imagine after 21 years they had to do all that over. Couldn't be, there's nobody in the school system that was there 21 years ago. And the population of the county is totally redistributed. And it just amazes me. And the court ordered Jacksonville to do the same thing. I remember well when Jacksonville was held to be a unified system.
You presided over Jacksonville.
Yeah, well, we did, and we sent it back to Judge Schoflat, who is now the 11th Circuit Chief Judge. And he worked the whole thing out, and everybody got an agreement, and they put in whatever they're busting or whatever they're supposed to do. 21 years went by, and they ordered them to do it again. See, nobody in the other parts of the country ever has to go through that. And it's too bad. But that's just very emotional, and it tears up the public school system. Look at the private schools that are in operation. And you go through these country towns, and every one of them got a little private school. And just has not been a good thing. I don't know the answer to it, except the decision I wrote in the Orange County, Florida school case is the only answer that can be in the house. They'd have to pass white schools to go to a black school. They wanted, their prayer was to go to school and there's a house. If we had stuck with that, we'd have saved the education system of the whole South. And you could have ordered that in one day. Just said this was it. It was unfortunate that you
Well, I noticed that in a number of your cases, the Corpus Christi case, the Austin case, and so forth, you emphasize the neighborhood school and other alternatives before busing as a last resort, by and large.
Well, in Orange County, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund had a national meeting to decide if they were going to appeal Orange County or Charlotte. And they decided that the Orange County case was too logical. Drew Davis told me that story, or somebody, I think it's Drew. And because it really resulted in almost complete integration. And that they'd be better off to go in the Charlotte case where they had these percentages.
Swan, Mecklenburg.
Yeah. In Orange County, which is larger than the state of Rhode Island, everyone had to go to school and there's a house. And I think it took care of all but 2 schools, something like that. In a substantial way. And that would be the end of this whole argument from now on. Particularly when you have open housing laws. People can just move. You still can't stop people from moving. We had a 3-judge district court case brought here not so long before I resigned from the bench to shuffle people around in various counties.
Was that the Atlanta Metro case? Yeah.
Metro case. I was at church one morning and somebody called my house and left a message that they had left South DeKalb going to Lynette, but we'll keep going till we cross the state line if we have to. That's the kind of messages you get.